Welcome once again to St. Mary's Chester Talks About Race. Many of us have heard the saying, we're not where we were, but we certainly aren't where we need to be. 2 days past the 2020 election, I find myself asking, where do we want to be? How far exactly do we need to go? How much fight do I have left in me? Most recently, 2 events have occurred in my own life. One involving my great niece, whose only desire was to go to college and to play basketball. And so she finds herself in a small town in western Pennsylvania, and she calls home crying. Her car has just been purposely hit by a woman, and she's driving in her car, and someone tries to push her off the side of the road. And then there was my father and my brother who were visiting me for a few days. My father admittedly has some memory loss, but not so much that he can't go outside and take a walk, which is what he did this one day. My neighbor, who is white, was having a yard sale, and she decided to sell him a weed whacker that he did not need. She didn't know who he was, but for some strange reason, she decided that he looked disoriented and probably didn't need and probably did not belong into the neighborhood. She claimed he was wandering around in other people's backyards. So she decided to call the police after she sold him this weed whacker. When the police shows up at my house, my brother answers the door, and sure enough, my father is there. The policeman, being very understanding, says, that he doesn't really know what the deal is and everything was okay. But when I heard what happened, it wasn't okay. This is my neighbor who had been living next to me for maybe 5 years or so. I'd been living in my home for 25 years. But I couldn't get over the fact that she decided to call the police on someone she first had sold a weed whacker to, and then decided that he didn't belong in the neighborhood. Something's very wrong. But the bold acts of others, out of their own fear, aggression, thoughts of supremacy, is something that I just cannot seem to get over. Where do we want to go? Where should we be right now? I know I should not be living in fear, and neither should any of my Black and brown brothers and sisters. I hope you enjoy the video we have for you today. Where should we be? What should we be doing?
Good morning. My name is Kendra Gerald. I'm 16 years old and I live in Roxbury. I'm a teen empowerment youth organizer, and I also work for the Boston NAACP. So that's my name and my job, but for too many people, I'm identified by my appearance. This isn't easy because I'm biracial. This shouldn't be a big deal, but for some reason, it is. From the time I was a child, I was asked many times whether I was Hispanic or Cape Verdean. I cannot describe the puzzlement on people's faces when I said my simple answer: I'm Black. I was raised by my dad, who is of Afro-Caribbean descent, and my mother was a Caucasian woman who is part Native American. She was also a drug addict and an alcoholic. Because of this, my father has had full custody of me and my older sister since I was an infant. Many people are surprised that a black male in America could take on the responsibility to actually raise 2 children. Growing up, many of my friends would tell me how surprised they were that my dad stuck around because theirs didn't. People's perceptions of us as black people are that we are expected to be gang-involved, incarcerated, and/or uneducated. Because of those perceptions that are ingrained in the history of our country, sometimes we as black people have the same perceptions of ourselves. It impacts who we think we can be and what we think we can achieve. So part of the challenge we face is to change those perceptions of ourselves and learn to take pride in who we are and where we come from. On the other hand, when approaching white people with my biracial identity, their responses were rather surprising. I am a sophomore at Boston Latin Academy, and during my almost 4 years at the school, I've encountered some challenging situations regarding race. When I was in the 8th grade, I became more open about the fact that I was biracial instead of letting others assume that I was Hispanic or Cape Verdean. These conversations revealed the racism and the prejudice that some white people have towards people of color. Some of my white peers started to tell me crazy things such as, my dad said black people aren't allowed over the house because they steal, or is that my parents would disown me if I ever dated a black guy. Being a teenager and hearing these things really started to make me think, is this what my white family said about my dad to my mother? In the end, is this what the Is this what the general white population thinks about me and other people of color? In the end, it all goes back to the question of identity and how, since slavery, racism has impacted how people feel about themselves and about others. So what are we going to do about these negative stereotypes that run through our society that are both hurtful and inaccurate? To begin with, days like today are very important. We need to have more opportunities to talk openly and honestly about race. When we do this, more people will learn to stop making assumptions. Then we can begin to have honest conversations about people's cultures and learn that the negative assumptions that are made about others are not true. Breaking down these negative stereotypes are an important step. We need these conversations to take place in schools and within different communities, and see that they engage people of all ages in the process. We need to find a way to have these conversations between people who live in the city and people who live in the suburbs, between rich and poor, and between young and old. We will never break down these stereotypes unless we bring people together so that they can get to know each other and appreciate the challenges that people of color face in this country. Breaking down stereotypes is just the first step. There also needs to be a commitment to root out the systematic racism that puts so many young people of color in jail and denies us the educational and vocational opportunities that we deserve. Developing our relationships and understanding of each other will serve as a foundation to build a more just society where all of us are given an equal opportunity to have a decent life. So I ask all of us to take a step back and open our minds. We must understand that we come from different cultures, but we are one race. We are the human race. The sooner we understand that as a country, the better off we will be. We must understand our differences and we must respect them. That's the America I dream of. Thank you.
Thank you once again for joining us on St. Mary's Chester talks about race.